This is TWiT.
Now, gentlemen, this first one, I don't really have an end game for. It's just something that struck me. I heard this at Interop. I heard this at Enterprise Connect. I've heard this in a couple of private briefings that we're moving from the idea of data warehousing to a new idea of data lakes. Now, data lakes has really become part of our terminology probably since, I'd say, June of 2014. Specifically, I want to talk about how in a traditional big data organization, we used to talk about storing data in a data warehouse. And a data warehouse had a very specific hierarchy. You wanted to separate the data. You wanted to categorize it so that when you were to access it with a relational database, it would make it easy for you to come up with some sort of conclusion, some sort of analysis. But we've been moving from that sort of static, solid, traditional, huge data warehouse idea into this idea of a data lake. Chibert, what is a data lake? How does it differ from a data warehouse?
Splish, splash, I'm taking a bath. You know, this is sounding awful familiar, like Horst Schelling from HIT Solutions. This is kind of almost what he was describing. You know, it's no longer I've got to have the data always online, always available. It's I need to be able to get to it within a reasonable amount of time. I've been hearing people use data lakes, but I've been hearing for every person I've talked to a different definition. I think this is one of those terminologies that hasn't quite gelled yet. But people are no longer going, I have to have it always online. It's more along the lines of, I'm going to start segmenting my storage so that I have larger amounts of nearline storage that isn't quite as fast, but I need access to once in a while. So I'm going to go with a data lake being something you have to walk to and, you know, maybe row out into middle lake to get to, but it's still available close by.
Right. Well, there's definitely that storage aspect to the whole data warehouse to data lake idea, because the fundamental idea behind the data lake is rather than taking data and putting into preset categories, you store everything, no matter whether or not you know it's going to be useful in the future. That really does change how we store things, and it also changes how we analyze things. One of the biggest uses of data lakes has been the growing trend for Hadoop. So, of course, I got to throw it over to you, Curtis. Hadoop has been very good at using both traditional data sets and what they've come to call data lakes, which are non-traditional, third-party, little bits and pieces of information that may not have an overall category or subheading, but nonetheless can be used in a relational database like Hadoop. Have you seen the data lakes conversation pick up at all on Information Week Radio?
You know, we have seen it on Information Week Radio, and we've talked about it a couple of times there. We're going to be talking about it more because it's getting more exciting, because data lakes are inherently part of the whole big data conversation. Now, big data lakes, by their nature, are unstructured, or at least a variety of different structures. You know, you can have traditional structured data, you can have completely unstructured data, you can have data in various quantities. The idea is that it's all thrown into this giant lake, which you can go and dip into later. This also gets into the idea for both storage and analytics of data tiering. You know, we hear a lot about that for a bunch of reasons, but, you know, traditionally, hot data is the data that you need on a moment-by-moment basis, and then you go through various degrees of, you know, warm, lukewarm, tepid, whatever, until you get to cold data, and that's data that you keep around, but you know that if you need it, you're going to have some warning, so you have time to either mount it if you're all the way back on tape, or at the very least send a program out to fetch it and bring it back into a more normalized structure if you need to work on it. Data lakes are cold storage. Data lakes are things that you know you're not going to try to do a give me an answer in 2 minutes operation on. The nice thing is, it is data that we're collecting and really keeping for future analysis. You know, maybe it's a case where we don't know what analytical techniques we might use on it. We may even admit that we know that we don't currently have the right analytical techniques to use on it, but we have faith that we will in the future. The danger of data lakes is security, because this is a bunch of information that we're keeping out there, and traditionally cold storage tends not to get the attention that hot storage does. So it's very much a complicated scenario, and it's complicated in huge, vast quantities of data.